Section 68 of Villette by Charlotte Bronte. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leanne Fortune, Section 68. Villette is one blaze, one broad illumination. The whole world seems abroad. Moonlight and heaven are banished. The town, by her own flambeau, beholds her own splendor. Gay dresses, grand equipages, fine horses and gallant riders throng the bright streets. I see even scores of masks. It is a strange scene, stranger than dreams. But where is the park? I ought to be near it. In the midst of this glare the park must be shadowy and calm. There, at least, are neither torches, lamps, nor crowd. I was asking this question when an open carriage passed me, filled with known faces. Through the deep throng it could pass but slowly. The spirited horses fretted in their curbed ardour. I saw the occupants of that carriage well. Me they could not see, or at least not know, folded close in my large shawl, screened with my straw hat. In that motley crowd no dress was noticeably strange. I saw the Count de Bassompierre. I saw my godmother, handsomely apparelled, comely and cheerful. I saw, too, Paulina Mary, compassed with the triple halo of her beauty, her youth, and her happiness. In looking on her countenance of joy and eyes of festal light, one scarce remembered to note the gala elegance of what she wore. I know only that the drapery floating about her was all white and light and bridal. Seated opposite to her I saw Graham Bretton. It was in looking up at him her aspect had caught its lustre. The light repeated in her eyes beamed first out of his. It gave me strange pleasure to follow these friends viewlessly, and I did follow them, as I thought, to the park. I watched them alight. Carriages were inadmissible, amidst new and unanticipated splendours. Lo! the iron gateway, between the stone columns, was spanned by a flaming arch built of massed stars, and following them cautiously beneath that arch, where were they, and where was I? In a land of enchantment, a garden most gorgeous, a plain sprinkled with coloured meteors, a forest with sparks of purple and ruby and golden fire gemming the foliage, a region not of trees and shadow, but of strangest architectural wealth, of altar and of temple, of pyramid, obelisk, and sphinx. Incredible to say, the wonders and the symbols of Egypt teemed throughout the park of Villette. No matter that in 5 minutes the secret was mine, the key of the mystery picked up, and its illusion unveiled. No matter that I quickly recognized the material of these solemn fragments, the timber, the paint, and the pasteboard. These inevitable discoveries failed to quite destroy the charm or undermine the marvel of that night. No matter that I now seized the explanation of the whole great fate, a fate of which the conventual Rufusette had not tasted, though it had opened at dawn that morning, and was still in full vigour near midnight. In past days there had been, said history, an awful crisis in the fate of Labassecour, involving I know not what peril to the rights and liberties of her gallant citizens. Rumours of wars there had been, if not wars themselves. A kind of struggling in the streets, a bustle, a running to and fro, some rearing of barricades, some burgher rioting, some calling out of troops, much interchange of brickbats, and even a little of shot. Tradition held that patriots had fallen. In the old Bassville was shown an enclosure, solemnly built in and set apart, holding, it was said, the sacred bones of martyrs. Be this as it may, a certain day in the year was still kept as a festival in honour of the said patriots and martyrs of somewhat apocryphal memory, the morning being given to a solemn Te Deum in St. Jean Baptiste, the evening devoted to spectacles, decorations, and illuminations, such as these I now saw. While looking up at the image of a white ibis, fixed on a column, While fathoming the deep, torchlit perspective of an avenue, at the close of which was couched a sphinx, I lost sight of the party which, from the middle of the great square, I had followed, or rather they vanished like a group of apparitions. On this whole scene was impressed a dreamlike character. Every shape was wavering, every movement floating, every voice echo-like, half mocking, half uncertain. Paulina and her friends being gone, I scarce could avouch that I had really seen them, nor did I miss them as guides through the chaos, far less regret them as protectors amidst the night. That festal night would have been safe for a very child. Half the peasantry had come in from the outlying environs of Villette, and the decent burghers were all abroad and around, dressed in their best. My straw hat passed amidst cap and jacket, short petticoat, and long calico mantle, without perhaps attracting a glance. I only took the precaution to bind down the broad-leaf gypsy wires with a supplementary ribbon, and then I felt safe, as if masked. Safe I passed down the avenues, safe I mixed with the crowd where it was deepest. To be still was not in my power, nor quietly to observe. I took a revel of the scene. I drank the elastic night air, the swell of sound, the dubious light, now flashing, now fading. As to happiness or hope, they and I had shaken hands, but just now I scorned despair. My vague aim, as I went, was to find the stone basin, with its clear depth and green lining. Of that coolness and verdure I thought, with the passionate thirst of unconscious fever. Amidst the glare and hurry and throng and noise, I still secretly and chiefly longed to come on that circular mirror of crystal and surprise the moon glassing therein her pearly front. I knew my route, yet it seemed as if I was hindered from pursuing it direct. Now a sight and now a sound called me aside, luring me down this alley and down that. Already I saw the thick planted trees which framed this tremulous and rippled glass, when, quiring out of a glade to the right, broke such a sound as I thought might be heard if heaven were to open, such a sound, perhaps, as was heard above the plain of Bethlehem on the night of glad tidings. The song, the sweet music, rose afar, but rushing swiftly on fast strengthening pinions, there swept through these shades so full a storm of harmonies that, had no tree been near against which to lean, I think I must have dropped. Voices were there, it seemed to me, unnumbered, instruments varied and countless, bugle, horn, and trumpet I knew. The effect was as a sea breaking into song with all its waves. The swaying tide swept this way, and then it fell back, and I followed its retreat. It led me towards a Byzantine building, a sort of kiosk near the park's centre. Round about stood crowded thousands, gathered to a grand concert in the open air. What I had heard was, I think, a wild Jaeger chorus. The night, the space, the scene, and my own mood had but enhanced the sounds and their impression. Here were assembled ladies, looking by this light most beautiful. Some of their dresses were gauzy, and some had the sheen of satin. The flowers and the blonde trembled, and the veils waved about their decorated bonnets, as that host-like chorus, with its greatly gathering sound, sounded the air above them. Most of these ladies occupied the little light park chairs, and behind and beside them stood guardian gentlemen. The outer ranks of the crowd were made up of citizens, plebeians, and police. In this outer rank I took my place. I rather liked to find myself the silent, unknown, consequently unaccosted neighbour of the short petticoat and the sabot, and only the distant gazer at the silk robe, the velvet mantle, and the plumed chapeau. Amidst so much life and joy, too, it suited me to be alone, quite alone. Having neither wish nor power to force my way through a mass so close packed, my station was on the farthest confines, where, indeed, I might hear, but could see little. "Mademoiselle is not well placed," said a voice at my elbow. Who dared accost me, a being in a mood so little social? I turned, rather to repel than to reply. I saw a man, a burgher, an entire stranger, as I deemed him for one moment, but the next recognized in him a certain tradesman, a bookseller, whose shop furnished the rue facette with its books and stationery, a man notorious in our pensionnat for the excessive brittleness of his temper and frequent snappishness of his manner, even to us, his principal customers, but whom, for my solitary self, I had ever been disposed to like, and had always found civil, sometimes kind. Once, in aiding me about some troublesome little exchange of foreign money, he had done me a service. He was an intelligent man. Under his asperity he was a good-hearted man. The thought had sometimes crossed me that a part of his nature bore affinity to a part of Monsieur Emmanuel's, whom he knew well, and whom I had often seen sitting on Mirette's counter, turning over the current month's publications. And it was in this affinity I read the explanation of that conciliatory feeling with which I instinctively regarded him. Strange to say, this man knew me under my straw hat and closely folded shawl, and, though I deprecated the effort, he insisted on making a way for me through the crowd, and finding me a better situation. He carried his disinterested civility further, and from some quarter procured me a chair. Once and again I have found that the most cross-grained are by no means the worst of mankind, nor the humblest in station the least polished in feeling. This man in his courtesy seemed to find nothing strange in my being here alone, only a reason for extending to me, as far as he could, a retiring yet efficient attention. Having secured me a place and a seat, he withdrew without asking a question, without obtruding a remark, without adding a superfluous word. No wonder that Professor Emmanuel liked to take his cigar and his lounge, and to read his feuilleton in Monsieur Mirette's shop. The two must have suited. I had not been seated 5 minutes ere I became aware that chance and my worthy burgher friend had brought me once more within view of a familiar and domestic group. Right before me sat the Bretons and de Bassompierres. Within reach of my hand, had I chosen to extend it, sat a figure like a fairy queen, whose array, lilies, and their leaves seemed to have suggested, whatever was not spotless white, being forest green. My godmother, too, sat so near that had I leaned forward, my breath might have stirred the ribbon of her bonnet. They were too near. Having been just recognized by a comparative stranger, I felt uneasy at this close vicinage of intimate acquaintance. It made me quite start when Mrs. Bretton, turning to Mr. Home, and speaking out of a kind impulse of memory, said, "I wonder what my steady little Lucy would say to all this, if she were here. I wish we had brought her. She would have enjoyed it much." So she would, in her grave sensible fashion. "It is a pity, but we had asked her," rejoined the kind gentleman, and added, "I like to see her so quietly pleased, so little moved, yet so content." Dear were they both to me. Dear are they to this day in their remembered benevolence. Little knew they the rack of pain which had driven Lucy almost into fever, and brought her out, guideless and reckless, urged and drugged, to the brink of frenzy. I had half a mind to bend over the elders' shoulders, and answer their goodness with the thanks of my eyes. Monsieur de Bassompierre did not well know me, but I knew him, and honored and admired his nature, with all its plain sincerity, its warm affection, and unconscious enthusiasm. Possibly I might have spoken, but just then Graham turned. He turned with one of his stately, firm movements, so different from those of a sharp-tempered, undersized man. There was behind him a throng, 100 ranks deep. There were thousands to meet his eye and divide its scrutiny. Why, then, did he concentrate all on me, oppressing me with the whole force of that full blue steadfast orb? Why, if he would look, did not one glance satisfy him? Why did he turn on his chair, rest his elbow on its back, and study me leisurely? He could not see my face. I held it down. Surely he could not recognize me. I stooped, I turned, I would not be known. He rose, by some means he contrived to approach. In 2 minutes he would have had my secret. My identity would have been grasped between his never tyrannous but always powerful hands. There was but one way to evade or to check him. I implied by a sort of supplicatory gesture that it was my prayer to be let alone. After that, had he persisted, he would perhaps have seen the spectacle of Lucy incensed. Not all that was grand or good or kind in him, and Lucy felt the full amount, should have kept her quite tame, or absolutely inoffensive and shadow-like. He looked, but he desisted. He shook his handsome head, but he was mute. He resumed his seat, nor did he again turn or disturb me by a glance, except indeed for one single instant, when a look, rather solicitous than curious, stole my way, speaking what somehow stilled my heart like the south wind quieting the earth. Graham's thoughts of me were not entirely those of a frozen indifference, after all. I believe in that goodly mansion, his heart, he kept one little place under the skylights where Lucy might have entertainment, if she chose to call. It was not so handsome as the chambers where he lodged his male friends. It was not like the hall where he accommodated his philanthropy, or the library where he treasured his science. Still less did it resemble the pavilion where his marriage feast was splendidly spread. Yet gradually, by long and equal kindness, he proved to me that he kept one little closet, over the door of which was written Lucy's room. I kept a place for him too, a place of which I never took the measure, either by rule or compass. I think it was like the tent of Peri Banu. All my life long I carried it folded in the hollow of my hand, yet, released from that hold and constriction, I know not but its innate capacity for expanse might have magnified it into a tabernacle for a host. Forbearing as he was to-night, I could not stay in this proximity. This dangerous place and seat must be given up. I watched my opportunity, rose, and stole away. He might think, he might even believe, that Lucy was contained within that shawl, and sheltered under that hat. He never could be certain, for he did not see my face. Surely the spirit of restlessness was by this time appeased. Had I not had enough of adventure? Did I not begin to flag, quail, and wish for safety under a roof? Not so. I still loathed my bed in the school dormitory more than words can express. I clung to whatever could distract thought. Somehow I felt, too, that the night's drama was but begun, that the prologue was scarce spoken. Throughout this woody and turfy theatre reigned a shadow of mystery. Actors and incidents, unlooked for, waited behind the scenes. I thought so foreboding told me as much. Straying at random, obeying the push of every chance elbow, I was brought to a quarter where trees planted in clusters, or towering singly, broke up somewhat the dense packing of the crowd, and gave it a more scattered character. These confines were far from the music, and somewhat aloof even from the lamps, but there was sound enough to soothe, and with that full high moon, lamps were scarce needed. Here had chiefly settled family groups, burgher parents, some of them, late as was the hour, actually surrounded by their children, with whom it had not been thought advisable to venture into the closer throng. 3 fine tall trees growing close, almost twined stem within stem, lifted a thick canopy of shade above a green knoll, crowned with a seat which might have held several, yet it seemed abandoned to one, the remaining members of the fortunate party in possession of this site standing dutifully round. Yet amongst this reverend circle was a lady, holding by the hand a little girl. When I caught sight of this little girl, she was twisting herself round on her heel, swinging from her conductress's hand, flinging herself from side to side with wanton and fantastic gyrations. These perverse movements arrested my attention. They struck me as of a character fearfully familiar. On close inspection, no less so appeared the child's equipment, the lilac silk pelisse, the small swansdown boa, the white bonnet, the whole holiday toilette, in short, was the gala garb of a cherub but too well known of that tadpole Desiree Beck, and Desiree Beck it was, she, or an imp, in her likeness. I might have taken this discovery as a thunderclap, but such hyperbole would have been premature. Discovery was destined to rise more than 1 degree ere it reached its climax. On whose hand could the amiable Desiree swing thus selfishly? Whose glove could she tear thus recklessly? Whose arm thus strain with impunity? Or on the borders of whose dress thus turn and trample insolently, if not the hand, glove, arm, and robe of her lady mother? And there, in an Indian shawl and a pale green crape bonnet, there, fresh, portly, blithe, and pleasant, there stood Madame Beck. Curious! I had certainly deemed Madame in her bed, and Desiree in her crib, at this blessed minute, sleeping, both of them, the sleep of the just, within the sacred walls, amidst the profound seclusion of the Rue Facette. Most certainly, also, they did not picture Miss Lucy otherwise engaged, and here we all 3 were taking our ebats in the fate-blazing park at midnight. The fact was, Madame was only acting according to her quite justifiable wont. I remembered now I had heard it said among the teachers, though without at the time particularly noticing the gossip, that often, when we thought Madame in her chamber sleeping, she was gone, full dressed, to take her pleasure at operas, or plays, or balls. Madame had no sort of taste for a monastic life, and took care, largely, though discreetly, to season her existence with a relish of the world. 6 gentlemen of her friends stood about her. Amongst these I was not slow to recognize 2 or 3. There was her brother, Monsieur Victor Kint. There was another person, moustached and with long hair, a calm, taciturn man, but whose traits bore a stamp and a semblance I could not mark unmoved. Amidst reserve and phlegm, amidst contrasts of character and of countenance, something there still was which recalled a face, mobile, fervent, feeling, a face changeable, now clouded and now alight, a face from my world taken away, for my eyes lost, but where my best spring hours of life had alternated in shadow and in glow, that face where I had often seen movements so near the signs of genius, that why they did not shine fully out the undoubted fire, the thing, the spirit, and the secret itself, I could never tell. Yes, this Joseph Emmanuel, this man of peace, reminded me of his ardent brother. Besides Messieurs Victor and Joseph, I knew another of this party. This 3rd person stood behind and in the shade. His attitude, too, was stooping, yet his dress and bald white head made him the most conspicuous figure of the group. He was an ecclesiastic. He was Per Silas. Do not fancy, reader, that there was any inconsistency in the priest's presence at this fete. This was not considered a show of Vanity Fair, but a commemoration of patriotic sacrifice. The church patronized it, even with ostentation. There were troops of priests in the park that night. Per Silas stooped over the seat with its single occupant, the rustic bench, and that which sat upon it. A strange mass it was, bearing no shape, yet magnificent. You saw, indeed, the outline of a face and features, but these were so cadaverous and so strangely placed, you could almost have fancied a head severed from its trunk and flung at random on a pile of rich merchandise. The distant lamp rays glanced on clear pendants, on broad rings. Neither the chasteness of moonlight nor the distance of the torches could quite subdue the gorgeous dyes of the drapery. Hail, Madame Walravens! I think you looked more witch-like than ever. And presently the good lady proved that she was indeed no corpse or ghost, but a harsh and hardy old woman. For upon some aggravation in the clamorous petition of Desiree Beck to her mother to go to the kiosk and take sweetmeats, the hunchback suddenly fetched her a resounding rap with her gold-knobbed cane. There, then, were Madame Walravens, Madame Beck, Per Silas, the whole conjuration, the secret junta. The sight of them thus assembled did me good. I cannot say that I felt weak before them, or abashed, or dismayed. They outnumbered me, and I was worsted and under their feet, but as yet I was not dead. End of section 68. Recording by Leanne Fortune.